Oleksandr Usyk successfully defended his WBO Cruiserweight title and unified it with Mairis Breidis' now former WBC Cruiserweight Championship. And a really entertaining fight. This fight I think definitely stepped up the level of interest in the cruiserweight division. I think as a whole for a lot of people, it definitely did so for me. Stepped up just the level of action that has taken place thus far in the World Boxing Super Series. I mean, which isn't to say that it hasn't been good up until now. It definitely has. But these semifinal fights for both the cruiserweights and the super middleweights are just doing really well, man. They're starting off extremely well. And this fight between Usyk and Breidis, that definitely started things off on a real good foot. And especially considering the fact that it comes literally a week before the other fight, the other semifinal cruiserweight fight between Yunier Torticos and Murat Gassiev, which is another unification, interestingly enough, although Torticos only has the regular, I think it was either the regular or the interim version of the WBA title. It's not the full one, which is, funny enough, still held by Denis Lebedev. Frankly, a paper version of that belt. Um, but I won't even get into that. Um, Usyk did beat Breidis. He got a majority decision over him. Personally, I actually scored it for Breidis. I thought he won it 7-5, but I wouldn't necessarily argue hard with anybody that had Usyk winning it. At least if it was close, anyway. I think people that had it like really wide for Usyk, or I don't know, they weren't watching the fight. They were watching Usyk. But it was a really good fight between the two of them. Brady started out really well. Was very accurate with the right hand to the head, right uppercuts as well. A lot of good right uppercuts. I think ultimately what let him down is lack of conditioning, or lack of conditioning at the very least in relation as compared to Usyk. Usyk was able to actually keep a very high pace throughout the entire fight. In the mid rounds especially, and in some of the late rounds as well. Breidis looked like he was really wilting. I could see why a lot of people would score some of the middle rounds, especially for Usyk, because of the fact that Breidis was looking like he was about to just melt down, and Usyk looked like around the fifth round that he was just about to take control of the fight and just completely take over. But Breidis didn't allow it. Breidis was hitting him throughout the fight. He was very accurate with his shots. Usyk, funny enough, his probably the best punch, the most kind of significant scoring punch of his was his jab, straight jab right to the face, followed by, I'd say, the left crosses that he was able to land to Breidis' body, because ultimately I do think that somewhat added to the fatigue that Breidis was feeling. A big part of it, though, from what I gathered, was Breidis is not used to that level of pacing in a fight. In a long, kind of drawn out fight against a tough, durable opponent that's just not gonna be wilted by his punching power and or by his rough tactics like he used against Mike Perez, where he pretty much just kind of would line up a right hand, boom, land the right hand, then grab him immediately afterwards and kind of bully him, basically. Just kind of use his leverage, his height, and his size leverage that he had on him to kind of lean on Perez and tire him out and prevent Perez from really getting into any kind of rhythm whatsoever. With Usyk, he had to settle out a little bit more because of the fact that Usyk is taller and longer armed than him. But he was actually doing really well, and I think doing him better than a lot of people really expected. I think a lot of people really expected it to be the Usyk show. Personally, I expected actually a much more dull fight. I thought it was going to wind up being kind of Usyk slapping and running, and Brady's trying to grab him the entire fight. I thought it was going to be Brady's missing and then grabbing Usyk, and or Brady slapping Brady's, or Usyk slapping Brady's, and Brady's trying to grab him after he gets slapped, and then Usyk just kind of doing like a little shuffle and shooting off to the side and avoiding it the entire way. But it was really good fight, a competitive fight all the way throughout. And Usyk got it, man. He did a good job. Fought. Finally, we see him fight through a bit more adversity than he has in the past. He had a bit more of a durable opponent, a higher level of opponent. A world champion in his prime in Brady. So this wasn't an old Marco Huck. This wasn't some of these these other guys that Usyk has fought up until now. Um, you know, I do think that people may go a little bit overboard and aren't giving Breidis enough credit for making Usyk look bad, quote unquote. Ultimately, it's just a matter of, when you're a top fighter fighting other top fighters, sometimes you're not necessarily looking as dominant or as flashy or as fresh throughout the entire fight, and you're getting tagged a little bit. Ultimately, top fighters tend to be able to solve other styles of top fighters, and that's exactly what happened here between Breidis and Usyk. Going into the finals, I think it's a little bit more enticing for a lot of people. I would definitely give Gassiev and Dorticos both a better shot at beating Usyk than I would have before. Breidis was able to kind of further expose and exploit some of Usyk's flaws. But even still, I'm not necessarily sure if either Gassiev or Dorticos are going to be able to both fight with the same level of acuity that Breidis did, box and time everything as well as Breidis did, as well as be able to kind of have the heart and the guts to be able to kind of keep themselves fighting throughout such a high pace, which, Usyk obviously can. He's very well conditioned. Breidis wasn't as well conditioned, but he was at the very least able to kind of gut himself through it, from what I saw. With Gassiev, I think I don't know. I get the feeling that some of that power really dissipates after a few rounds, and Usyk would be able to kind of run away with it, so to speak, be able to just kind of use agility to outbox him. And it's somewhat the same with Dorticos, but also you have to add into the fact that even though Dorticos would be able to, I think, reach Usyk with some of those big power shots, he's a bit chinny himself. He did get dropped, hurt several times against what's his name? I can't think of the guy's name now off the top of my head. Yuri Kalenga. When he fought Yuri Kalenga. Great fight, matter of fact. Anybody that hasn't seen that fight, I'd very much suggest you watch it. Really, really good fight between those two. But this fight definitely makes me look forward to both the other semifinal between Gassiev and Dorticos more, as well as the final for Usyk versus whoever wins that fight. Funny enough, I would actually give Dorticos a better shot at beating Usyk than I would give Gassiev. I think that Gassiev's lack of kind of killer instinct finishing ability against Lebedev would wind up having him lose against Usyk. I get the feeling that Dorticos is a bit more willing to let it kind of hang out, to put it on the line, whereby even if he's being outboxed by Usyk, he'll still be shooting for the stars, basically bombing away and trying to score that big shot. And I mean, I do give Dorticos a slight edge over Gassiev going into their fight, but still, Gassiev, he's a big puncher in his own right, very good body shots, and like I said, Dorticos has been hurt before by a lesser puncher as compared to what Gassiev has, or at least from what I project of what he has, from what I gather of what I've seen of him that he has. But good win for Usyk. Whoever wins this tournament, I think, is really in prime position to really get a lot of props, to get a lot of respect and regard, and they'll deserve it regardless of whatever happens. And as for Breidis, I mean, honestly, I think Breidis should go after Lebedev. I think Breidis would beat the crap out of Lebedev, and in doing so, he could snatch up that belt and line himself right up for whoever wins the tournament ultimately. It looks like they already even have it scheduled for May 11th in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be Usyk versus the winner of Dorticos versus Gassiev. And so I'm loving it. Richard Schaefer's put on an excellent product, the World Boxing Super Series. I hope it continues. I hope they pick out a couple more divisions. I think either bantamweight or featherweight would be really good as one of them, and then maybe toss in, I don't know, light middleweight. I think like those two divisions would be good, or perhaps light welterweight you know, say like either 154 or 140 and 126 or 118. You know, I think something like that would be actually an excellent selection. Um, I'd mention 108, but they're the guys at 108 are pretty much already fighting each other. You know, shit, they're already kind of doing that by process of elimination with between Taguchi, you know, not Kosei Tanaka anymore. He was going to do it. Heki Butler, Kenshiro, and so on and so forth. You know, I'm sure Acosta will get back up in there as well. But I'm rambling now, so that's all I got for this one. Props to Usyk, good win for him. Props to Gassiev, good performance by him. And yeah, like I said, excuse me, props to Gassiev. Props to Breidis, good performance from him. And I hope he goes on and takes out Lebedev, man. Takes out the trash, basically. You know, the weak link. Take out the weak link and make the division better and more enticing for it. You know, there hasn't been fights this good at cruiserweight since probably O'Neal Bell, John Mark Mormek, and David Hay were in the division, kind of knocking each other over and everything. So, good one, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.